Welcome to Design Downtime, the podcast where we celebrate the joys of living a balanced creative life. I'm your host, Guy Siegel, a design director in Toronto, Canada, and I invite you to join me on this journey as we redefine what it means to be a successful design professional. Let's break free from the shackles of hustle culture and embrace the full spectrum of human experience, because life is too precious to be spent only in pursuit of productivity. Today, I'm delighted to be talking with Laura Worrick. Laura is a neurodivergent design leader living in Austin, Texas. With over 15 years of experience, Laura has collaborated with various brands including Amazon, Bayer, BBC, IBM, Houghton Mifflin Harcourt, United Nations, and others. She is an advocate for neurodiverse talent in the design field and has written and spoken about the topic in various forums. Currently, she is a design manager at Cisco, leading the design system team in the visual design program for Cisco IT. Outside work, you can find her hanging with chickens, dogs, and horses, or giving people hand-poked tattoos. Laura, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here.
Excited to have you. And you want to talk to us today about backyard farming.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, it's something that we've been doing for a while now, and it brings me a lot of joy outside work. So happy to chat about it.
So let's start with basics. What is backyard farming? How do you define it?
Yeah, so, to me, backyard farming can look like anything. It can be having a little flower pot on your back patio in an apartment building where you're growing tomatoes. Or it could be a full-on urban homestead, or like just a full-on homestead, right? Meaning that you are kind of growing a majority of what you need. You've got chickens, you've got bees, maybe you've got goats too. Like you've got the whole thing. So for us, living in Austin, Texas on a relatively small lot, we're kind of doing the best that we can with sort of the circumstances that we have. When I grew up, I worked on a farm from the time I was about 12 until I was maybe 20, 21. And it was incredible and magical. And it really kind of formed a lot of my perspectives on the way I think I approach life and work. And yeah, it was an incredible experience. And so that's something that I've always carried with me and wanted to do beyond just like working at that farm as a teenager. My partner and I lived in Massachusetts for a while, and we had a big garden, and it went really, really well. And then we moved to Texas, and it's a little bit harder to grow things here. It's been a real curveball for us. But we've been very determined over the past 10 years to try to get stuff to grow. We've got 5 very large raised beds. We have 4 areas where we're doing native wildflowers that we can cut. And then we have 7 chickens. So we're interested in getting bees at some point as well. So that's sort of the next thing that we're looking towards. But yeah. I think it's whatever you want it to be at the end of the day.
So before we talk about your own farm, I want to go back to your childhood, because I don't know a lot of people who spend 8 years of their lives working on a farm. How did that happen?
And when I was a kid, I really wanted a job, which whatever that means about me, I don't know. But I was babysitting at like 11 and 12 years old. And then there was this farm that was like literally a mile from our house. I grew up in like a pretty rural area in Massachusetts. Well, it was rural at the time. It is not rural anymore. And we knew the woman who ran the farm because we went there like multiple times a week to get corn and fresh produce. And I just asked her, I was like, can I work here? And she was really skeptical at first because I was like a 12-year-old. And so she was like, all right, you can start by working in the field. Like, we can't put you in the farm stand yet. Let's see how you do out in the field. And so I did. I worked out in the fields for several months, and I got to work with her grandsons who were just a few years younger than me. And it was so fun. And she just like immediately took me in as like her own grandchild. And yeah, so after a few months of doing that, I sort of like earned my way into working in the farm stand. And I just kind of became like a fixture in the farm stand. I was there all the time. I worked during the summer, I worked like several days a week and on the weekends. And once school started back up, they closed in like November. But if I didn't have like soccer practice after school, I would work there, and I would work there on the weekends too. So, it was just like, it was incredible. Like, I have so many good memories, but like there's this one memory in particular that I always kind of go back to when I'm having a rough day. And it was this fall day. The weather was beautiful. It was dry. It was crisp. Like, the leaves are changing colors. There's a little slight breeze. And I was sitting on the hood of this old truck that was the corn truck. That's what it was like an old stick shift. It's how I learned to drive a stick shift that we'd take out into the field to go get corn. And it was so after school, and I'm sitting on the hood of the truck, and I was eating a bag of freshly popped popcorn from our field, and an apple fresh from the neighboring town's orchard. And it was just like this beautiful moment of like eating the most incredibly crisp, sweet, tart apple with like the saltiness of the popcorn, and just like being outside and like feeling very alive in that moment. It was like really powerful. And so I think about moments like that, and it's something that I try to bring myself back to like ground myself when I am stressed out, or when I'm feeling like, oh my God, like what have I gotten myself into? Like, this is, I'm overwhelmed. And so, I think like those are the things that really stood out to me as a kid, and that I now bring as an adult and into the things that we're doing in our backyard. But yeah, like let me see, like, I was responsible for kind of like stocking everything. And I would also like, so the corn there was very, very good. And people would literally come from like different states to get the corn at Holton Farm. So around like dinner time, it would get crazy in the stand, and we would like run out of corn regularly. And so we'd have to like jump in the corn truck and go pick a bunch of ears as fast as we could, and throw them in a couple of bags and bring them back out and put them on the table, and they'd get scooped up as quickly as we could bring it out. But yeah, I learned a lot working there. I learned how to work really hard, and how to like really appreciate where things come from and how things get grown, and the amount of effort that it takes to do that,
After age 20, when you finish working on that farm, when did you sort of establish your own backyard farm in Massachusetts?
Yeah, so that was several years later. It's funny, I had this moment when I was like 20, I think 23 or 24. I was working my like second job out of college. I had moved to New York, and it was horrible. I was working in the fashion industry. To this day, it's like the worst job I've ever had. And all I could think of were those like really beautiful days, like working on the farm and wanting to be back there. And I remember calling, her name's Mrs. Holden, Ruth Holden, and I called her in tears. And I was like, if I quit my job, can I come back and work for you? And she was like, I don't need anyone right now. I'm so sorry. And I'm like, it's okay. I'll figure something else out. But, it was like one of those moments where I was like, okay, the thing that makes me feel like not safe, but like, I don't know. I'm trying to figure out what it made me feel like. It made me feel like a full person. Like, I felt like working that job made me feel like I had broken apart in a billion pieces. And like being back on the farm and being outside, I was like, that is what could like help me be whole again. And so I ended up quitting that job, and I moved back to Massachusetts, and I ended up I did a lot of different things, but I spent time outside a lot. I worked in a national park for a little while in Georgia. I sort of had all these weird jobs. But anyways, to answer your question, we didn't establish our garden in Massachusetts until like 2011 or 2012, because my partner and I had spent like the previous years traveling. We were living in Beijing. We lived in Georgia for a little while. So we established our garden. There was a community garden down the street from us. We were living in an apartment. And we were like, let's do it. My partner was like, let's start a little garden. I'm like, cool. And we spent so much time down there. We grew so many different things because the weather during the summer in New England is perfect for growing things. It just gave me this like sense of like peace and like fullness that I didn't really get elsewhere. And I think that was like also the moment that I started to realize like I've always been super into food, like even as a kid, right? Like I was telling you about like the moment that I remember so fondly is like eating, right? Like having like this fresh apple and this popcorn, it's salty and like, sort of all that those beautiful combinations that happen with different foods. And so I think because I was so interested in food, I was starting to make that connection between like, oh, like I can grow the things that I want to eat and I can make those things taste really, really good. And I can make them more like nutrient dense and I can make them healthier. And they haven't been sitting on a truck for 3 weeks traveling from somewhere in a refrigerated unit, for a month or whatever it may be. And just getting that opportunity to like realize like, wow, like a carrot, like straight from the ground can be so sweet. It can be like candy compared to like a carrot that you get at a grocery store. Yeah, that was really kind of like that kind of like awakening for me where I was like starting to put a bunch of pieces together. And then from Massachusetts, we were there for a couple of years and then we moved to Texas like 10 years ago. And so, yeah, we got really frustrated the first couple of years being here because we were foolish and thought like, oh, like we'll just do what we did in New England and like start growing stuff. And like it all worked out. Here, like the climate is so different. The soil is so different. The soil like doesn't, it's not nutrient dense. Like it doesn't have the things that it needs to really support a lot of the like produce that we wanted to grow. It's taken us many years, but we've finally kind of started to, again, put those pieces together and figure out like, okay, what do we need to put in the soil? And like, how do we like give back to the soil after a growing season? So like one thing we're doing right now is, we had some of our beds had like tomatoes and like cucumbers and peppers and sort of like, kind of standard stuff. But, we realized that if like we couldn't just do that again next season without giving something back to that soil. And you could already see like the soil was starting to just not look as healthy. And so what we're doing right now is we've covered all the beds with black-eyed peas. So we did a crop of black-eyed peas. It's like crazy to grow like black-eyed peas. I'd never done that before. So it's really cool. And what that does is it puts nitrogen back into the ground, into the soil. So we picked all the beans and then, cut everything off and let it kind of let the roots essentially die in the soil. And then now, as that is finishing up, we're putting something called crimson clover down. And it's like a cover crop. It goes across all of our beds and it does the same thing. It provides a lot of nutrients into the soil. And so typically in Texas, the growing season in Texas is weird, right? Like it's not like summer because it's too hot. So you're usually looking at like maybe like January to May. And a lot of people are even like, they'll grow stuff now as it's starting to get cooler and you can kind of just grow throughout the winter. So we're going to kind of like give up this winter's growing season through probably January, do those things that'll give back to the soil. And then we'll start growing more stuff come the spring.
What's the difference for you farming in Massachusetts versus farming in Austin, Texas? What is a different feel?
Yeah, there is a very different feel. It's one that at times is like kind of frustrating. I think being outside is really important to me. And like I have so many memories from childhood of just like spending most of my time with my brother playing out in the woods or in the yard or, doing whatever, getting in trouble, but it was always outside, right? as I got older, I'm like, oh, I can't stand these winters. Like they're awful. And I want to live somewhere warm. And so that's part of the reason why we moved to Austin. And the first summer or two, it's like, cool. Like it's so hot and I don't care because there's no snow, but it's brutal, especially as things have changed with our climate. Our summers are really hard now, just even in the 10 years we've been here. And so my favorite kind of time of year to be outside and be in our yard and doing that sort of work is like the late fall. So like kind of like late November, early December, where it's finally starting to cool off. Even in the springtime too, like February, March, but you'll have these like incredible days in the winter where it's dry, like low humidity, and the sun's out, and you get like a nice little jacket on. And we have a big fire pit in the center of the backyard with so like rocks and chairs around it. And, we'll have a fire going and be working on the beds or whatever work needs to be done outside. We'll work on that. It's just like, it kind of brings me back to that experience as a kid, sitting out on that corn truck. And so I think climate wise, they're very different. And there's challenges that we have with the soil and with the heat. There's still those like magical moments that exist no matter where you are. I think back to like one of my favorite days that we've had in the last several years. We were digging up a couple of areas of our yard to start planting the wildflowers and like native plants. And it must have been like early spring. We had a fire going in the fire pit. We were just like working outside, and like I just brought out like our cast iron pan and like cooked up lunch and like threw in some stuff from the garden and like had this like just totally like outdoor experience. And just having that like smell of the smoke in the air, and you're working with the soil, and it's just you feel very alive.
Does the time aspect of farming, meaning you sow something and then you have to wait for a long time to see literally the fruit of your labor, are the lows low but the highs higher because of that patience you have to put into it?
Yeah. And because we've had so much failure too, it's like, this was like one of the first years that we had like a really successful like tomato crop since we've been down here. Every time we got tomato, we're like, damn, like this is so good. This is so exciting, seeing like another one growing, another one coming in. And like I think that's part of it, right? Like it's part of the joy and part of the process is, you put this little seed in the ground and you're just like, I don't know, little buddy, are you going to make it? Is anything going to come up? And then all of a sudden, you've got just a little seedling that's coming up, and it's so exciting. Like to those first few days after you put the seeds in the ground, where you just, every time I'm like, I don't know if I'm going to get anything. And then everything starts coming up and like you have this green everywhere and you're like, oh my God, like I did that. And so like having that, seeing the different stages of the plant as it grows is like really satisfying for me. Just doing what we can to keep it alive and keep it healthy. Like one of the things that we have to contend with down here is, which is up in New England too, but like pests. So, we discovered this past summer or past spring that we had aphids, and we were really interested in trying to find like non-toxic, like more organic ways to get rid of these pests. And so we learned that ladybugs will eat aphids. And then we also learned that you can order ladybugs online and have them shipped to you. So we got ourselves a little ladybug house for them to live in. Apparently it's a thing you have to do. And we got like 1,500 ladybugs shipped to us, and we put them into the garden at night, and they got rid of all the aphids. They ended up not having enough food and then leaving us for greener, buggier pastures. But, if we have insects and like pests again next year, like we'll do the same thing. We'll just introduce ladybugs or other kind of insects that can help us kind of protect our crops. So it's pretty cool.
So far, we've talked about crops. But you mentioned chicken. How did you move from crops to livestock?
It's a great question. I love this story. So, yeah, we, have always been interested in like having a garden. And I think it's only the last couple of years that we've had an interest in becoming like more sustainable. So like having sort of more of what we need and just kind of generating as much as we can on our own. And the chickens to me are so funny because I love animals. Like if my partner was like, let's get 15 more dogs, I'd be like, great, like I'm in. That sounds wonderful. The humor in it comes from the fact that when we first met, he was like, I respect animals, but I don't want to live with animals. Like, and that was like really hard for me because I loved animals. And I was like, all right, we'll see. We'll see. I didn't want to like push it, like I didn't want to be in a situation where we got a dog and he hated the dog and then it created tension. It wasn't a good environment for the animal either. So I was very patient. I waited 7 years. We've been together almost 15 now. I waited 7 years and he finally was like, all right, we own a house. I think we should get a dog. And I'm like, okay, like let's do it. And so we got a little Shih Tzu named Lemmy, who is the sweetest, chillest, like the best, like first dog for someone who's not sure if they want dog. And they're best buds. They love each other. They are like, my partner really worships our dog. So last year, we talked about like maybe getting chickens before, and we had friends that had chickens. We watched this like documentary about someone that like had like a small farm, and he was like, maybe we should do that. And I'm like, yeah, okay. I'm like, I'm down. Let's do it. So being ADHD and being very good at like hyper focusing, I like super hyper focused on chickens, learned everything that I could, did all this research about like what we could have in Austin and like all this stuff. And so we ended up deciding to get them. We got chickens earlier this year. So it was back in March was when we got them. And yeah, we got 5 chickens. And that was really fun because we got them as chicks. So we got to watch them grow and, take care of them. And, especially as they are now starting to lay eggs, it's been really great to feed them some of the stuff we've grown, right? And like, that they're eating really good food and they're getting really good nutrients. And that's making the eggs that we eat even better and better for us. And so that's something that's like really important to me. But so anyways, I just find it really funny. There was this moment where, we had 5 chickens and I also convinced him that we need to get another dog. So we got another dog this summer and the dogs love the chickens. And so I looked out back and there was this moment where he was like in a lawn chair inside the chicken run with his 5 chickens and his 2 dogs. And I'm like, look how far you've come, man. Like it took all this time, but I finally got you on board with having animals. So yeah, we just picked up 2 more chickens yesterday. So we're up to 7 now. And they're a lot of fun. They are super funny and they're a weird animal, but they're very goofy. They frighten so easily, which is like makes sense for being a prey animal. But yeah, we just get a lot of joy out of just watching them, and we'll literally just like pull up lawn chairs and like hang out and watch them play, and they'll jump on us, and it's been a lot of fun. Highly recommend it.
What's it like growing chickens in your neighborhood? Like, is anyone saying anything? Or because it's Austin, people expect the weird?
Yes, they do. We've been very lucky, I think, also like just living in Texas, like, I think it's like not super unusual for people to have chickens, especially like in a small neighborhood. And so, we let our neighbors know who like are like the closest in proximity to us. Like our houses are literally like less than 10 feet apart. And so we were like, we're getting chickens, like we'll give you guys eggs. And they have 2 little boys. And so they were thrilled. And everyone else in our neighborhood has little kids too. And so we used to joke this spring, one of the moms used to say that we were running a Montessori school because the kids would all come over in the afternoon and like play with the chicks and walk through the garden and it was really funny. And our neighbors that are really close to us, their son, who's like 3.5, he doesn't know, he knows my name, but he doesn't call me by my name. He calls me Chick's mom because I'm the mom to all the baby chicks. So I'll be walking down the street and I'll just hear him yell, "Hey, Chick's mom." And it's so cute. It cracks us up. And so they've been really great. Even when we discovered that one of our hens was actually a rooster who crows every morning and throughout the day and sometimes in the evening. But they've been so good about it. They're like, "We don't care. Like, we're up at like 5:30 every morning with the kids. So that doesn't bother us." And no one else has complained either. I think it helps, getting free eggs at times too. So yeah, we've been very lucky that there have been no complaints, and because there's always that risk. Our long-term goal is to actually move to upstate New York and have a much bigger property and more chickens and probably more animals and a bigger garden for sure. So that's sort of like our long-term goal that we're working towards in the next couple of years. So this is like our testing ground. This is like our little test kitchen in the backyard to see like, what can we do in an environment that isn't always conducive to growing things? Like, how can we challenge ourselves and learn from this and then bring that to an environment that will be more kind of fertile?
What do you see? What do you envision in that future farm?
Yeah, that's a great question. We've been talking about that a lot. We really want to create like a community space. We have this vision of like having a big barn where we can sell some of our like produce, like invite people to the property, sell some produce, sell some eggs, sell like some of my art, potentially sell other like local folks goods and art, invite people to the property for dinners or coffee or, just like having this kind of like communal space where people can come and gather and enjoy being outside and enjoy the animals and the gardens and everything. So yeah, we're hoping to get like several acres. I'd also, I ride horses, and so I'd love to be able to have our own horse on our property. Big dreams right now, but we're working towards it. So
That's amazing. Laura, where can people find you?
oh man, I guess in a few places. So you can definitely find me on Instagram. My handle is Worrick, if I will spell. When I was a kid, my brother couldn't say my name, so he called me Wawa. Worrick. My last name's Worrick. So WAWAWAWICK. That's on Instagram. A couple easier handles is Mothership Farm ATX. That's where you can see our farming stuff. And then Wawa Pokes is my tattooing stuff. So yeah, definitely check us out and see what we've been up to.
Amazing. Thank you so much for being on the show today.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me. This is a lot of fun.
This is all for this episode of Design Downtime. Thank you for joining me. And until next time, I hope you enjoy your downtime.